Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. I was originally going to film this video yesterday. That's not important to you, except that I, had to make the effort to do my face and hair, which I never do anymore. And then I decided to try on a dress that used to be big for me. And then I got stuck in that dress for a couple of hours and started crying hysterically because there was no one here to help me out of it. And also it was just sort of like, oh my God, my body doesn't belong to me anymore. At the same time, there was something very strange going on with my sister. She had posted on Facebook that she had gotten married. And somehow, despite the fact that this was happening, A, on Facebook, which member of Gen Z is using Facebook? Certainly not to announce their marriage. And B, it was posted at the wee hours of Friday night. So all of my family, for some reason, many generations of my family, were contacting me to be like, what is this about your sister being married? And I was like, I'm trapped in a dress right now. I can't help you. And in conclusion, I didn't film the video, but I'm here now. And my sister's not married. So please tell my mom. This is going to be our last video for a while before I go on hiatus/maternity leave, which will be truly a blessing for me because I kind of want to hide and never be seen by anyone at all. If I could cover up all the mirrors, in Beauty and the Beast with the castle, if I could just cover all the mirrors and never be seen by anyone, that would be great. I've taken to responding to all messages of, hi, how are you? With the screen grab of Alana Glazer being like, how am I? I am 35 weeks now. I am uncomfortable, and it will be really nice to just not have to be on camera for a while. But I will still be available to answer questions. I will just be doing it in writing so that you don't have to see my face for a while. I don't know if anyone is wondering this, but I don't know that I'll be very secretive about my child, either their name. You now know my name, so it's kind of And I don't know that I would conceal their face from you. Sometimes I see those posts and I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here. We're showing a picture of the baby, but we're not showing the baby's face. I think if anything, you would rarely see pictures of the baby, but when you did, you would see its face. So that's just a thought I'm having. Who knows though? This month's spell read, which I only have an electronic copy of and can't display here nicely for you, is Kindred by Octavia Butler. I really wanted to talk about it on its own merits. It's a really, really good book, but also just in terms of what it explores about two different things. One about race and gender. The main character is a Black woman in the 1970s. And she's married, and we know this right away, but we don't know right away that she's married to a white man. So when she travels back in time to pre-Civil War, the South, and gets mistaken for a slave, the dynamic shifts when we learn that she's married to a white man, which has only been legal for a hot second. It's a really interesting juxtaposition of the racial politics of the era compared to basically where those racial politics came from, especially since she has a very complicated relationship with Rufus, the white man that she is consistently going back to protect, for reasons that you'll understand in the book. One of the questions that I had suggested that you pose to yourself as you're reading is, who is the worst white man? Because there's a lot of terrible white men, but it's very interesting. She sort of drops these hints of how parts of her marriage and her relationship are unequal. And is it driven by gender? Is it driven by race? It's kind of impossible to tell, which is really interesting, especially given the juxtaposition as she's traveling in time. So slave narratives, slave fic, this is a really common trope in fan fiction. It's also a very common thing to happen in science fiction. Lots of speculative books focus on this inequality. It's kind of one way that they provide stakes. And there have been a few books that are sort of people argue that it romanticizes the slave narrative. People say this about Gideon the Ninth. I don't agree, but we can talk about that. And also a book that just recently came out, Docile. But there's, it's a very common thing that comes up in science fiction and fantasy worlds. Super, super common in fan fiction. I think if you're a fanfic reader, you can probably think of at least 3 slave fics right now. But Kindred really puts into perspective, what is truly problematic about a slave narrative. You know, there are people who talk about, okay, you're romanticizing the relationship between the like slave owner and the slave themselves. And I do think that, yes, sometimes it's super problematic, and it really applies, because in this book specifically, you can see why there are romantic and sexual undertones, but also you can't forgive them. You know, like you physically, you cannot romanticize them because of the just truly horrific power imbalance and everything that's woven into the power imbalance. So it kind of makes for a very good case study on, okay, why are some stories really unacceptable and other stories maybe don't fall into this category? So it'll just be an interesting conversation to have if you'd like to read the book. I'm very sensitive to like horror, sensationalism of you know, gore, or like trauma porn. I don't like that sort of thing. And she really kind of skirts that very expertly. So yeah, while it is a tough read, it can be uncomfortable. It's also very interesting. So I encourage you to read it. We're going to run through the questions that remain. This one is about religion, which is something that I've discussed at length before. Like I did a whole video just on what I think about religion and my journey from going from like a very sort of conservatively religious household to my own thoughts. So I'm not going to spend as much time on this as I did in that video, but we are going to go through this one. So this is maybe kind of a big question, but if I remember right, I think you once said you were raised in a religious household, but you aren't really religious anymore. And my question is, how did you do that? I have no socialization or out of house activity, which I know is pretty common right now. But even in the before times, I had no friends or activities, only church stuff, and I go basically for interaction. I have no real passion for God. I don't feel the things you're supposed to feel, and lately I've been feeling uneasy about being part of a community that has harmed and continues to harm so many. Plus, I can't lie, the Trump stuff and pandemic behavior that has been quite visible on American platforms and media is quite off-putting as well. I'm involved with children and youth programs. Yeah, I used to teach Vacation Bible School, which was so fun for me. And like, it's still something that like I loved the experience of doing, even though, like you said, it was sort of the God stuff. I usually had fifth graders, and I had a lot of fifth graders that were like, what if I don't believe in this? And I was like, then you don't believe in it, but we're still having fun together for a week, right? Like, it's fine. I'm involved with children and youth programs and feel so much guilt about participating and possibly exposing kids to a potential future of self-hate, repression, guilt, feeling like every bad thing that happens to you is a punishment for not being good enough. Basically, I don't want to be putting other kids in the same position I currently find myself in. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's why when I had kids say, like, I'm not sure if I believe this, I'd be like, yeah, then okay, like, you know, it's honestly probably a great thing that you're around them and not necessarily indoctrinating them into this culture of fear, but allowing them to ask questions and answering them as honestly as you can. I think that it's valuable in general for adults or people who are in adult positions to admit things like, I don't know, or I was wrong, or I used to think this and now I think this. Not specific to religion, but just in general, I think that's true. I don't even go to a legalistic or super strict church that says stuff like that, but still that type of biblical interpretation exists, and even the most accepting of churches still teach some very scary guilt-inducing stuff. This is true. Fear is the basis of a lot of religion. I'm not asking you to sort through my guilt or tell me to stay or go. That's not a burden I'd put on you. I just needed to admit out loud I'm having a crisis of faith. It's very isolating to only know Christians. I have no one to talk to about how I fake every single conversation about how important God is to me or how I really don't feel any of that feel good whatever. Mostly I find it all super cheesy. I appreciate you letting me use your inbox to vent, even if you don't respond. Religion is a hot topic and you may not want to get into it. I won't be upset. But if I do reply, which I am here doing, how did I let go? And they add, maybe it wasn't a very hard thing for you, but I'm very scared of being wrong and going to hell or whatever. Yeah, I mean, so like I said, a lot of religion is fear-based, especially a lot of Christianity is based on this like need to indoctrinate other people, and that's less to like save other people and more to make the members of the faith feel that they are persecuted despite the fact that they are not. I think the first thing that I would tell you is there is a difference between institutional religion and faith, and there's a difference between questioning your faith and questioning whether you want to be part of this particular institutional structure, the way that institutions and churches and church leaders who have a lot to benefit from, the way that they interpret religion doesn't have to be the way that you interpret it. So if you're having a crisis of faith, that would be one thing. That's obviously something I can't help you with because it's very personal. But if you're having a crisis of like, I don't feel that I belong to this institution, I don't feel proud of this institution, I think that's perfectly valid. I mean, it's not like any of us are super happy with government. You know, corruption is everywhere. And institutionalized religion is like corrupt in almost any form. That doesn't mean that everyone involved is corrupt or everyone who believes is corrupt. It's just all part of a system that's not so good. There are a lot of systems that are not so good. Humanity is much older than first of all, humanity is much older than Christianity. And the earth itself is much older. Mr. Blake is teaching evolution right now, so I've been refreshed on these concepts. Also, I think it's very strange that people don't think that like evolution and religion can coexist. Like, I'm not saying that they do, but they certainly can. The incremental idea is just another example of people taking the word 7 days too seriously. But yeah, so for like 30,000 years, we had this, female matriarchal goddess, earth goddess. And for 6,000 years, much smaller number, we've had this patriarchal god who's responsible for a lot of the world's like worst things. So that's not relevant. I just like to point out that, the universe is so big. And the idea that we could possibly know who owns it, it's very silly to me. For me, it just became a question of acceptance. And a lot of that, it can be easier just from getting out of the situation you're currently in. I think that everybody sort of eventually arrives at a place where we have to question what our beliefs are and whether we want to still exist in this ecosystem that we live in. And that might be hard to do while you're still physically in this system. In that sense, yeah, you might just be dealing with your personal guilt of being part of a community where you don't necessarily believe what everybody else believes. I think that that's okay as long as you can make peace with it within yourself. And, for me, it was just kind of like, okay, I don't know what happens after I die. I truly have no idea. Whether you use religion or your faith as the backbone of your morality or not, I think that's just like my view on life is that it's important how we treat each other. That's the most important thing to me. So if I die and nothing happens, and this is the only life I get, I want to make sure that I don't regret the way I lived it. Also, if I die and I'm faced with St. Peter at the pearly gates and it's like, oh, surprise, like every single thing your mom said about religion was true, am I still satisfied with the way I lived my life? I'm basically at a point where either way, I feel, I don't know if I'm like allowed to argue with St. Peter. In my vision of this version of the afterlife, I'm allowed to tell St. Peter, like, I did the best I could with the materials I had. I was the best person that I understood how to be, and it's in God's hands now, and I have the acceptance I'm talking about comes from my sense that I think the God that I want to believe in, the God that like I would actually love and not just fear, would be fine with that. There's no way to prove that. There's no way to prove anything. But I think living your life being afraid of hell is a pretty hellish way to live your life, Like, it's hard to say whether it's right or wrong or what's next for us. Actually, this is sort of like one of the other questions. I think that you should at least be forgiving of yourself. Putting it in faith terms, there is grace and acceptance. And whether that is something you earn for yourself or something that is God-given or however you want to see it, I think that there is something in resolving internally, not for any other purpose, but for just to help you find peace. I think that there is something important about just honoring what you believe. The only thing that really outlives us is the relationships that we have with other people and the way we touch other people's lives. That is the only thing that really lasts, the way we make people feel. And so I guess you could call that my faith in a way. And whether it's because of God or because I find that it is comforting to believe that that's how I fit into the universe and that I'm doing the most good that I can possibly do with what I was given. Yeah, I think if you can find peace in something like that, yeah. And don't think of yourself as like lying to children. Also, you don't have to lie to children. I always liked to encourage the questions that I got and to really think about them. And if I didn't know the answer, to tell these kids, like, I don't really know the answer. And I think we spend life trying to find the answers that feel right to us. And it takes longer. It takes a lot longer than however old they are, however old you are. So, yeah, hopefully that helps. What are your thoughts about books coming to you at the right time? Are there books you've tried to read but for whatever reason couldn't or didn't get, only to come to appreciate later? And this person is asking because Persuasion is a book they read as a teen and was very about, but over the years has become their favorite of the Austen novels. I get that with Persuasion specifically. Whenever I see people try to adapt it, I find it interesting what people take from it. Because for me, it's a second chance at love story. And that only makes sense to people who have loved and lost, like people who have regrets. And when you're a teenager, you don't have those regrets. You can't relate to them. You're only like, and it's just money. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you're right about books coming at the right time. I think you find new things in old books all the time. I think this is the best thing about books, is that like the best ones, you'll continue to find things as you read them and whatever it needs to give you at the time. One thing that definitely came to me at the right time was the Two Lives of Lydia Bird by Josie Silver. I read that at the beginning of the pandemic, and for some reason I was reading a lot of grief narratives to kind of help me get through the stress of what was happening. I Capture the Castle was one I read as a teen that I probably would have very different ideas about if I read now. It's more like what I focused on when I read it. So when I read it the first time, I was sad and heartbroken right alongside Cassandra. I was like underlining the passages about her pain and stuff and just being like, I don't understand. Like, it's this unrequited love story, so beautiful. And then, I read it again and you realize that no, this isn't really about unrequited love so much as being about love and loss, kind of like Persuasion, except that in that case, this was not the right man for her, and she knew it, and she made the right choice. So I think it's like, yeah, some books, they find you at the right time, but also you find certain aspects of them that really make a lot more sense to you at certain points in life. There are certain young adult plot conceits and tropes that I can't appreciate now because I'm just too old for that. But other times there are certain things that still resonate in a different way because now I'm older and I've been through it and I can agree that the way things happened were for the best. Things that would have really hurt me as a teen now give me sort of peace as an adult. So, yeah. So someone saw a post about writing big friend groups, and they said, I've been trying and struggling to write a large friend group as part of my current work in progress, inspired by the insane and wonderful friend group in The Commoner's Guide, which after reading multiple times, I feel like I'm a part of. Good, you are, thank you. And I feel like I can't get the big group dynamic down. The individual relationships between characters are fine, but when they're all in the same place just hanging out, it feels like it falls flat. Do we have any advice on that? I mean, it is hard, because you have to give each character in the group a very distinctive voice. And when it's a large group of people, that can be hard to do. Your imagination's kind of working overtime. Like, what does this person bring to the conversation? Which I guess my first piece of advice is sort of check yourself in terms of like, who needs to be in this conversation? Which points of view need to be present in order to get us from point A to point B? And if it's just like everyone's here and they're all making jokes, which is something I do a lot, I guess that would be the part you're asking about. But just to address, first of all, you want to be very carefully choose who is part of the conversation, especially if two people or like two characters who are very similar are bringing sort of the same energy to the conversation, then one of them probably shouldn't be there for whatever reason. There were times in The Commoner's Guide when like they had similar senses of humor, and so they would bring different things to the conversation depending what the conversation was about. Harry was like the most morally driven, so if it was a conversation with something like that, then you're getting something different from him than you would get from Theo and Blaise, who have potentially no morals, or Theo would have his sense of loyalty that didn't really belong to the other characters, or Blaise would have his like his insecurity that the other characters didn't have. You'd want to make sure that those things are coming through in the jokes that they make, what they contribute to the conversation, what the conversation is about. I would say that if you're having a flaw and it's falling flat, it's probably because you haven't entirely taken into consideration why each person should be present for this conversation, or how to draw those different aspects out of them. The way that I would usually do it is I would construct the scene, figure out how is everybody like here, so do the setting basically. Why is everybody here? How did they all get here? And how do they all get out of here? And where is this conversation going to take us? So like what starts the group conversation and what ends it? And then I would usually just leave that like whole group conversation part blank, because it's just the skeleton of how do we get from joke A to joke B, or joke A to serious point B. And so once you figure out where you want to start, what initiates this group thing, and where it's going to take you, especially in terms of what's going to happen next in the plot, especially if like a character is going to get upset, for example, or if you need to specifically draw a conversation to a big reveal. That happened a lot in the Commoner's Guide too, where, someone would sort of blurt news at the end, and it would just be like, okay, you almost work backwards. Like first of all, who would say this? Who would accidentally let this slip, or whatever the mood is, and who would tee them up for it, because someone's going to bring it up somehow. You have to construct the skeleton of the conversation in terms of where are we going? How do we get here? Where are we going? About how much time do we want to spend on this? But that's essentially how I would do things, is just make sure there is a purpose to why everyone is in the room, and what their character is bringing to the conversation. And not that they're just making sort of generic conversation, but that this is something that this person, if they were here in the room, would bring up. I'm very hot. I'm not sure if you've talked about this before, but I'm trying to balance living in the present while also trying to look forward to the future. It's so hard because for the better part of the past decade, it feels like I've been stuck in the traumas of my past. I've only recently been enjoying and cherishing the present moment, slowly starting to love myself and love life. I'm graduating soon though, so everyone around me seems to look forward to the future more than I do. I know planning ahead and setting goals for the future is important, but it feels like I'm finally starting to appreciate my life for what it is right now, but somehow that's still not enough. So you say being alive is an achievement enough in your eyes, and that's true, yeah. There are two lines, sorry to interrupt myself/you, but there are two lines in two different fics that I think about all the time. One is Pansy saying to Theo in The Commoner's Guide that people get up and do difficult things every day. And one is from How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is when Herpo says to Daphne, if I know one thing about life, it's that it goes on. They sort of sum up my concept on life. And life is short, but life is also long, which now that I think of it is something that Helen actually says in The Commoner's Guide. But, it's short when it comes to doing all the things that you want to do and accomplishing all the things you want to do, but also long when it comes to taking each day at a time. I guess that's another thing. Since I didn't think I'd live up to this point, I have no clue what my future holds, and I'm terrified. I don't know what to expect. I don't know if I should expect anything. I like where I am now, but time keeps going. Life is long, and I'll have to face the future soon enough. I'm not entirely sure what my ask is about, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. So, as you probably know, I am carrying a human baby and having these sort of thoughts as well. When I was deciding whether or not to even have children, I was kind of like, is this even ethically responsible? I don't know what the world is going to be like for this kid's. I don't know what the world is going to look like in 10 years, 15, and I'm supposed to be promising this tiny human being that I'm bringing into the world that there's still going to be a world here for its whole generation, that it's going to be able to have everything I had, that it's going to be able to fall in love and that it's going to witness all the things that I've been able to witness. How do I know? How can I make those promises? And it stresses me out kind of a lot. There's so many things that we're not really going to know the answer to. The unknown is so... It's hard to live by anchoring yourself to the unknown. I get that. And so I just have to think, about the present and the fact that, I love my husband and I want to see him be a father, and in some ways for myself. I was telling my therapist the other day about how I occasionally worry that I'm going to make, major parenting mistakes, because it's inevitable. Everybody's parents leave marks on them, whether they mean to or not. And so I told her, like, I know I'm not going to make the same mistakes, but it's scary not knowing what the mistakes I make are going to be and how I'm going to impact this like person's development based on my weaknesses that I might not even know. And she said something very important to me, which was, it's not in the rupture, it's in the repair. So it's not in what you do wrong, it's in how you fix it. In this sense, it's about how you approach what you've done and what you learn from it, and acknowledging your part when things go wrong. But I also think it's just a very interesting, philosophy on life. It's not in the rupture, it's in the repair. It's not in the things that go wrong, it's in the ways we make them better. One of the focuses that I've had thematically not just since the pandemic, but I feel like since like the just grossness of like the Trump era, is really this idea of like what we bring to each other and what we allow ourselves to take from that. The fact that like we have relationships with other people is really quite meaningful. We're told to put so much expectation on like what we become or what we produce or what value we, like what our worth is as like as our position in society or whatever. But really what matters is the value that we have for other people. And one of the things that I have really focused on a lot is this idea, the love that you put into the world, not just for other people, but for yourself, for your hobbies, your interests, your work, that sort of purity of feeling, those moments where you find that you feel good about who you are and existing in that moment exactly as you are, that you're actively recognizing that that is life, that it's not the, the checkpoints along the way or what you accomplish or what you see or, what grades you get, that, those moments of feeling like, when you have like a really good laugh with someone, the moments when you realize you really like a person or that you're in love with a person, the moments when you realize you've been wrong, the moments when you get someone's forgiveness, and you sort of feel this like spark of existence, that those are the things that you value, and those aren't going anywhere, like those things are going to exist for you in the future. That is the promise that I can make to you. If there's anything I know about life, it's that it goes on and it contains those moments. And you will never be able to make the conditions perfect. You will never be able to make the circumstances exactly as you want them to be, but you will always be able to adjust the way that you feel about them, the way that you react to them. It's just that sort of overall outlook on life, on that the love you give will give back to you eventually. What you put into the universe will come back to you. You get what you love most is the thing I always say, because the things that you really invest your energy in, those are the things that will reward you, because those are the things you put time into. Those are the things you put effort into. What you love, it comes back to you, because that's where you put your resources. That's where you devote your time and your energy. And I do think that if you devote most of your thoughts of the future to fear, then fear is what you'll get back, and uncertainty. And I understand where you're coming from, because I do feel a lot of fear myself. I don't really know that I've made the right decision. There are still times when I feel like maybe it was irresponsible, or maybe I could have just like, what if I would have been happier just like living, like life was perfect as it was. And then I decided to do this sort of crazy thing. I decided there was room in my life it was almost like I decided, you know what, I've actually got so much love here that I now feel comfortable giving it to someone else. Or, like I'm very proud of the environment that I created, the home that I made. The home that I made. And I think that there is enough here that I don't have to just hoard it for myself, which is maybe, I'm sure not everyone would agree with that philosophy. But that's what it felt like to me. It felt like to me, like I feel so full. I'm overflowing with goodness and with hope. And there's room for me to share it. I think before I was like scared that I would never have those things. And so it was sort of selfish. It's like, I want these things just for myself. And now I feel this need to, that there is room for another person, not just in my body, which I feel like there's not much room left, but, in my heart, in my home, in my marriage. So I guess what I want to tell you is it's not unreasonable for you to feel this way, but I hope I hope that this isn't the thing that you cling to. I hope that instead you allow yourself to believe that, think how good you feel now and how that could just expand. The unknown is vast, but that also means that there is so much room for so many things that you haven't imagined yet for yourself, so many twists and turns you can't predict yet. Some of them are going to take you to, some of the best places and the best people and the best feelings that you have yet to meet or feel. So I hope that you allow yourself to look to the future that way. Yeah. And on that note, I'm going to be away for a little while. I will still be here on my social media to talk to you whenever, so don't feel like the big sistering has gone away. It just won't be on video for a bit. But yeah, on that note, this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you after a little bit of content creation. I'll see you soon.